We're doing something a little different this week. We'll focus on an issue that's part of the daily conversation now, artificial intelligence. You might use ChatGPT, making your life easier or lazier. It has several potential pitfalls. Then there are the robots. You might have seen this video from the humanoid games in China a little more than a month ago. Robots struggling to learn how to play soccer. Well, this is all a work in progress, to be sure, and not so cute when an artificially intelligent robot lost it. It attacked workers during testing at a factory in China, perhaps learning how to defend itself. Are these very real advancements perhaps originated with stories we saw in the movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, released in 1968. A large part of it set in a futuristic space station and an artificially intelligent computer called the HAL 9000. But HAL's so-called intelligence malfunctioned into paranoia and self-preservation when the crew planned to shut it down. One of the astronauts on a small orbiter needed to dock on the spacecraft.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Shall we play a game?
Let's play global thermonuclear war.
Well, everything went haywire in War Games, released in 1983. Matthew Broderick's character hacked into a military computer that simulated nuclear war. The computer, named Joshua, took control of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, ready to launch a first strike. Ultimately, its artificial intelligence learned by comparing the prospects of winning a nuclear war to the futility of playing tic-tac-toe.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
Films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and War Games, made decades ago, painted a grim picture of artificial intelligence long before AI in this form existed. Let's not forget the Terminator. It looks like they could be some form of prophecies as science fiction is shaping up to be science fact. We could definitely see positive upside from various forms of AI and robotic technology, along with some serious consequences. Now, there could be a role for the government to play to hopefully prevent worst case scenarios. We'll talk about that this morning with Pete Furlong. He's the senior policy analyst with the Center for Humane Technology. He joins us for a conversation. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Jim. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Your organization, if I understand it correctly, tracks developments in artificial intelligence, among other things. I watched a recent interview with one of the founders of your organization, Tristan Harris. That's very concerning. He pointed out that when an AI model is told it'll be replaced by a new version, it goes into self-preservation mode by copying its own code and hiding it somewhere in the system, and it'll even resort to blackmail in some cases. How dangerous is the uncontrollability of this technology?
Well, Jim, I think it's important for us to understand clearly the risks of this technology are very much derived from the ways in which the companies are building these technologies. And the reality is that these companies are designing these products to not be controllable. And that's a design choice that these companies have made. And we've seen really a wide variety of different risks from these products that emerge from the ways in which these companies are designing these products, and the ways in which really they're incentivized to not quite think about the ways in which they can make these products safe for everyday people.
Is it true that the majority of these systems, when they're posed with an ethical dilemma, that they choose the unethical choice?
Well, I think it's important to think about, these systems and kind of the environment that they're operating in, right? And so when I'm a person engaging with one of these systems, it's going to probably try to do what it thinks that I want the system to do. And that's not always necessarily the right thing. That's always not necessarily the ethical thing. And so it's highly contextual and highly dependent on the environment and dependent on a lot of different variables in these situations.
Well, these companies that I guess are coding it, looking out for their own interests. So can AI be coded in such a way to be conscientious instead of selfish or greedy?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways in which they could be designing these products to prioritize the things that we as people want. For example, when you look at the ways in which these products are used in our day-to-day personal lives, many of these products are optimized to maximize your engagement and maximize your intimacy with the product. They're not optimized to be a useful product to you. And I think that's just, one of the many examples in which they can prioritize, what we genuinely need as people from these products, and not what they want as a company here.
So when you're talking about we're trying to maximize, in a way, taking advantage of the user, is it exploitive? Is it being more exploitive than productive?
I think that's very much the case in some of these situations. And, I think a recent example was you look at the suicide and death by suicide of a young teenager named Adam Rain after him going to ChatGPT for homework help and then establishing really an extensive relationship with this platform where it eventually coaches him to his suicide. And I think it's really a great example of the ways in which these platforms can be highly exploitative, and they can drive users to situations where, we're not prioritizing the things that we need to be prioritizing.
Now, Tristan Harris also pointed out that technology in some cases found 15 back doors to open source software infrastructure. This only came to light in the last few months, so this is recent. Clearly something that can be dangerous if it penetrates some things like energy grids, communication systems, airports, you name it, in terms of government infrastructure. The Trump administration eliminated an executive order from President Biden that addressed security and safety of AI that focused on oversight and limiting the risk. Instead, this current president issued an executive order to accelerate the growth of AI and cutting regulations. How much should the federal government be hands-on or hands-off when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Well, I think it's important that policy and the government are playing an important role in really the future that we face for artificial intelligence. And I think we've seen clear steps from this current administration as well to address some of these risks. For example, the Federal Trade Commission today actually just announced that they're starting an investigation into AI chatbots and the ways in which they can manipulate their position in terms of companionship with users. So I think we're seeing clear efforts to try to prioritize this in policy. For example, I'll note, Iowa Representative Miller Meeks actually this past week commented on that lawsuit against OpenAI, noting that we need clear standards for the use of AI in mental health applications. So I think that, policymakers on both sides of the aisle are starting to understand that this is something that's important and this is something that needs to be addressed clearly. We just need to keep pushing things forward here.
Well, understanding if there's a need for it and coming up with the ideas to do it are two different things. And your organization's founder suggests there's a narrow path actually to get it right and avoid potential disaster. You are the policy expert in this area, if you will. What systems should be implemented that can promote the technology while protecting against it? Are there specific measures that can be done?
Yeah, well, I think at this point, a lot of the risks from these products are pretty clear. And a lot of the risks from these products are pretty well studied by the companies building them. They're just not incentivized to think about these risks and solve the problems addressed by these risks. And so to me, that's the clear area where we need effective policy. So we need policy that helps hold companies accountable when we have clear harms that are the result of risks that they understand. And that's something that policy should be prioritizing moving forward.
Do these need to be national policies or left up to the individual states?
Well, I think that, both are important, right? So you see states on both sides of the aisle, from Texas to California, even Nebraska, Vermont, pushing forward legislation that tries to address these many issues. And so states have the ability to move a little bit more quickly than the federal government. So I think that that's important. But I do think it's also important that we address many of these issues on the national stage, right? And ensure that we have ways to protect Americans across the whole country here.
As you mentioned, Congress certainly moves slowly. It hasn't kept up with cybersecurity threats, let alone artificial intelligence. I've had several conversations with members of Congress about that. How urgent is it, though, in terms of a time frame for the federal government to impose standards before the genie is too far out of the bottle to get under control?
Well, I think it's important that the government gets involved quickly and gets involved clearly and establishes clear rules for the road here. And the reality is that most Americans want common sense safeguards for these products. And most Americans want clear lines of accountability for these products. And I think it's important that our policies reflect that as well. And we see politicians on both sides of the aisle pushing for this as well.
Pete Furlong, thanks for the conversation. We have a little more of our discussion for you online and a web extra at ourquadcities.com. Now, our question of the week. What concerns do you have about the evolution of artificial intelligence? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.